Hi friends, here we are in May, and it is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and I'm picking a book called The Ocean Calls, a Haenyeo Mermaid Story by Tina Chow, illustrated by Jess Snow. And I'm thinking that most people have never heard of this really interesting group of women. They call themselves Haenyeo, and they are from South Korea and a really beautiful volcanic island called Jeju. And these women have been... it's really amazing. They dive, free dive, which means they don't use any breathing equipment, and all they have is flippers, a wetsuit, and goggles. And they dive down to 10 to 20 meters, and they hold their breath the whole time, and their job is to collect seafood from the ocean floor. And this group started around the 17th century is how long ago they started this diving, and it's very old tradition. Only women do it, and it's often mothers who teach their daughters how to do it. And I just thought it'd be kind of interesting to look at a culture that we don't know much about in a country we probably don't talk much about, like South Korea. So it's beautiful illustrations, and I thought it'd be interesting to learn about something new. The Ocean Calls. Oh, isn't that pretty, the end papers? The Ocean Calls. Dayon and Grandma stretched and watched the sun's first rays kiss the sea. "The ocean is calling me today," said Grandma. "I must dive." "I want to be a Haenyeo like you," said Dayon. "You're like a treasure-hunting mermaid." Oh, I forgot to add that they're not really entirely sure why this tradition started, but it may be because men were called to war, and then it fell upon the women to make sure that their children had food to eat and they had money to keep their family going. And so women started diving for the seafood, and then they could sell it, and they became pretty prosperous at the time anyway. And now, as women get older, a lot of the younger generations are not interested in doing this, and it's a lot harder to make money selling seafood than it used to be. So it's a dying art. They're not going to be around forever. But that Dayon remembered that time she jumped off the big rock last summer while visiting Grandma. Water had filled her ears and nose, burned her eyes, and stung her skin. And worse, the deep ocean where Grandma swam was full of sharks and other scary creatures. Dayon shivered. You know, I love the ocean, but I have to say the thought of diving every single day like they do with no air and all the other creatures that live in the water gets a little bit scary. "You can't grow into a mermaid if you don't finish your abalone porridge," said Grandma. Dayon held the shimmery blue abalone shell and rubbed her fingers over its holes. Grandma cleaned and boiled the shellfish from her catch to sell, but this porridge she saved for Dayon. As Grandma watched the dishes and she and Dayon practiced holding their breath, 1, 2, 3, 14, 15, 16, Dayon let the air escape in a long sigh. Grandma squeezed Dayon's hand. "Don't worry, I learned to be a Haenyeo from my mother, and now I will teach you." So when I was a kid, my brother and I used to practice holding our breath under the water. I can't remember how long we could do it, but these women can hold their breath for 2 to 3 minutes while they dive. That's a really long time. It might not seem like it, but it is. After breakfast, Grandma put on sunscreen, a diving suit, flippers, a lead belt, and a mask. Dayon put on sunscreen, a suit, flippers, goggles, and a snorkel. So they wear weights to help them stay down at the bottom while they're looking for the seafood. Grandma carried her tools to pluck treasures from the sea. Dayon carried hers to pluck treasures from the shore. Together they sang a Haenyeo song. "I eat wind instead of rice. Take the waves as my home." Sorry. On the sand, the Haenyeo tromped, clumsy in their flippers, but as soon as they dove, splash, they sank like mermaids. Dayon sat back, feeling like a beach urchin. She wiggled her toes in the tide pool. Grandma popped up out of the water, whistling as she let out her held-in breath. Again and again, the Haenyeo dove and came back up for air. The sea breeze carried the sound of their whistling. So they whistle to each other so they can communicate with each other, because obviously if you're in the water and you're trying to yell super far, it's going to be hard to hear somebody, but whistling's easier to hear. Dayon climbed onto her lookout rock. A shell gleamed under the water. She jumped in to grab it, and as the water circled her waist, she shuddered and gasped. That's when Grandma's voice echoed in her head. She should not be afraid. The ocean is your home. Know the sea and find its gifts. Dayon looked around at the other girls giggling in the shallow water. She took a deep breath of hope and unclenched her fist. The waves rushed around her ears, but she relaxed when she felt the soft touch of the sea anemone at her fingertips. Maybe I could swim deeper. After collecting 10 sea gifts, Dayon heard singing as the orange globes of the Haenyeo's nets floated closer to like a giant setting sun. Grandma and the others swam back, and Dayon rolled round nets up the shore. I found pretty pebbles and shells, said Dayon. Beautiful, said Grandma. Now you're ready to dive with me? So I don't know if you can see them, but they have these orange floats, and that tells people where they're diving. It's a way to be safe and a way to keep track of each other. Dayon set her bucket on a flat rock and looked at the sea, and she gulped. What if I can't breathe? What if a shark comes? What if I can't escape? Grandma sang, can't you hear what the waves are saying? They're calling to us. Come home. Dayon looked into Grandma's sweet eyes and swallowed her fear and nodded. Side by side they walked. When Dayon could no longer feel the ocean bottom, she locked hands with Grandma. Take a deep breath, calm your mind, and then we'll dive. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be able to do this. Down, down, Dayon and Grandma dove, but... So remember, they don't have any air. They're just holding their breath. And here's that float I was talking about. Dayon swam right back up. It would be scary to swim down there. It takes a while to get used to it and adjust, and you have to keep practicing. Dayon whistled as she let out her breath. Too quick, said Grandma. Relax, explore. Down, down, down they went. This time Dayon held her breath longer. Seaweed swayed with the current. Colorful fish darted by. She pointed to a garden of sparkling treasures. Suddenly, Grandma pulled her up, up, up. They both whistled. Dolphins, Grandma panted. Dolphins bring hungry sharks. Dayon's heart beat faster. She kicked with all her might. What if they couldn't escape? Her arms felt like lead weights in Grandma's belt. So one thing she was afraid of bumping into a shark, and if there are dolphins, it usually brings a shark. So that's why they decided to go back to the top. She swam to a nearby boat. A Haenyeo waited to lift her to safety, and that's when Dayon remembered her wish. Dayon shivered in Grandma's warm embrace. We worked together to keep each other safe. You were brave, Dayon. You'll be a fine Haenyeo someday. But Grandma, I didn't catch anything. Oh, but you did find treasure. Grandma opened her hand and gave Dayon a sparkling turban shell. Diane's thumb followed the curve of the shell's spiral. She smiled. For the first time, she felt at home in the sea. Like a mermaid, like a true Haenyeo. So here the author provides some more information about the Haenyeo and her experience. She went to visit them and talk to them so she could do research for this book. And like I said at the beginning, the Haenyeo are a group of women who have been... the first recorded instance of them was about the 17th century. And they have been diving ever since. And they collect the seafood from the ocean. And they wear flippers, a wetsuit, and goggles, but they do not wear any kind of oxygen tanks or anything like that to help them stay down. And they can dive for up to they hold their breath for up to 2 to 3 minutes, and they can dive 10 to 20 meters as they look for seafood. And they sell the seafood to earn money for their families. And they're called Haenyeo, and they're from South Korea, and they live on an island called Jeju, which is supposed to be really beautiful. And it's a volcanic island, and it's just a very interesting culture that I didn't know anything about, and I'm sure you didn't either. And I think it's important for us to learn about different cultures. So I'm also attaching a short little video in the body of the paragraph of your assignment that shows a real video of these women diving and swimming. It's very interesting. I hope you like learning about different people like I do. All right, friends, happy reading.